Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much, Christian, cutting me off mid-sentence.
That was
Uh,
the mute hammer hitting everyone.
so, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this second workshop in the app development series. I hope this Wednesday afternoon, wherever you are in the world, finds you keeping well. I'm literally going to hand straight over to Paul, who will lead you through this afternoon session. We are recording it. I just wanted to say thank you very much to everyone who's joined us from the previous session as well. It's great to have you on both of these, and I recognise a few familiar faces as well from some of the talks we've been doing over the last few weeks. And really, it's just to say thank you for your engagement. The only thing I would sort of suggest and encourage you to do it between these workshops, if you are looking at developing an app or you've got an idea, is please do make the most of the team. Obviously, we're here for one-to-ones in between sessions. There's going to be a bit of a break after today's session before the next in the series, which will be taking place. I think it's the first or second week of February. I'd have to double check my times on those. I mentioned at the last one, for attendees who are able to make all 4 of the sessions, there will be some funding available, which is designed to help you to hopefully develop a version 1 of your app. That's now been approved, so I'm going to be working with Christian. I'll be speaking to Paul outside of this as well. We'll discuss a potential format, maybe a pitch idea, and I'll be speaking to Paul to see if he's able to help us in terms of maybe a panel event, or if there's a colleague that he has who might be able to join us for an afternoon. So there will be more information coming out in the next week or two for everyone who's signed up for these events. So please do keep an eye on your emails for those. But it's really just to say, don't feel that in between sessions you can't reach out to the Essex Startups team, because there are other ways we'll be able to help you outside of the app development series as well. So please make the most of those. And I'm going to stop talking now and hand over to Paul. So thanks very much, everyone. Great to see you all again.
Hi, everybody, and hopefully most of you know me from last time. But if you weren't here last time, I'm Paul Swaddle. I run a company called Pocket App, and we develop applications for a wide range of business clients. So we are the providers of picks and shovels to people's ideas, is the way we like to look at it. As Andy mentioned, there's going to be a bit of a gap between now and next time. Now, that actually works out, I think, quite well in terms of where we're up to at the end of today. Today, we're going to be going through a bit around application user experience and design. And then this will give you a gap in which you can go away and apply these ideas to your idea and get yourself in a position to hopefully go on and win the competition that Andy was mentioning, because you'll need that period to formulate your ideas and spend some time thinking through them. And hopefully what I'll give you today is some tools to enable you to do that. So let me start by trying to share my screen. There we go. Hopefully, if this is working right, you should now have a screen with a slide saying app UX and design. Christian's nodding, thankfully, so I guess that's working. Right, so what are we going to go through today? Let me just change my slide. Right, so what we're going to do is talk about some functionality, business planning, developing of personas, wireframing and paper prototyping, the difference between user experience, UX, and design, some tools to help you do that process, and then and then talk about building an interactive prototype. And at various stages, what I'm going to try and do is give you some examples of what we have done, the process that we use, to give you a framework that you can follow. And whether you're doing it with a business that's helping you like we would for a commercial company, or you're doing it collaboratively with a group of university colleagues, the same basic core principles apply. So what are we talking through? So first of all, wireframing. So that is capturing your idea in what I would call an engineering diagram. This is not about what it looks like, it's about how it all connects together. Then having done that, you then start to look at how might it look visually. So what are the designs? For us, that's a collaborative process. I would suggest it needs to be the same for yourself, because doing something in glorious isolation rarely results in the best outcomes. So working either with colleagues or maybe a design student that you know to help you work through the ideas. And what we would typically do is develop 2 or 3 concepts for the visualizations and then refine from there. And then having done that, we would then build out an interactive prototype, which we're going to go and talk about later on. And finally, at the end of this stage is doing some user testing, putting it in front of people who are going to be the users and seeing what they think, seeing if they interact with it in the way that's expected, or if you need to change things, because actually changing things at this stage is relatively straightforward and relatively cheap and not time consuming. Changing things once you've actually coded them, much more complicated, and therefore to try and avoid. So at the end of this phase, what would the outputs look like? Well, you have a user experience wireframe that takes you through the journey of what the movements around the application are. You have a comprehensive set of designs that looks at what every page looks like. And by stitching those two together, you can make an interactive prototype. Now, I'm going to go through this in more detail, so this hopefully will make more sense when we get to the end than it does at the beginning. Before you build anything, you do need to think about how what is your business plan? How is this app actually going to work commercially? Now, apps can be launched for a whole series of different things. It could be direct to consumer, so it could be, a game like Fortnite, where the monetization is through in-app purchase and allowing you to buy, in the case of that, frivolous pieces of clothing, which apparently are an absolute necessity and net them around about £1 million a day. Or alternatively, it could be that somebody is paying for the application and they're paying you to produce it, in which case you need to think about what your pricing model is. Today, we're going to talk about a mythical app that you're all going to build. This is the Essex University application, and we are going to, through yourselves, define what that might include and what that might not include. In the case of this, it's unlikely that the consumer would pay for the privilege. Well, you are all paying for the privilege through your fees, but you wouldn't pay directly additionally for the app. So the university would fund it. Now, how would they fund it? Well, they could pay you a straight license fee of X per year, or they could pay a fee based, for example, on users. So that user licensing of, right, for every 1,000 users, you pay X is a different model. And there are a number of models for charging for B2B products. Alternatively, your app may not have a charge involved with it. So we build a lot of applications for businesses where the application is a portal onto their product. So we've done some work with, for example, Juicens, which is a wholesale hardware store. Now, their app is all about pricing and giving pricing information to people in the trade, in the building trade. So their app doesn't make money per se. It's the purchasing of their end product that makes the money. So it's just an enabler. So your business plan in that case would be, how much does this cost and what's the benefit to the business compared to other marketing routes? This is a screenshot of a real business plan, anonymized, for a client that we were helping the other year. And I think it's just to try and give at this stage an idea of some of the things that you might need to take into consideration. This is quite a complicated model. It looks at costs such as product development, marketing and sponsorship. How do you make some profit? There's IAP, in-app purchase, advertising, sponsorship, merchandising, commercial relationships, R&D tax credits. That's gross profit. Then what's the net profit, the actual revenues? And then what are the variables that determine this? And this will allow you to build a business model. Now, this one is complicated, and so I'm not going to try and explain it in detail. However, let me, if I can, I will now throw up a simplified version, which I can share and is going to be much easier. Let me just unscreen share for a second so I can find it. Bear with me, sorry.
We have a question from one of the
Yes, do you want to ask that question while I get this up?
Yep, so the question is, will the materials, essentially the Excel spreadsheet, be shared afterwards? So
absolutely, I will give you, in fact, what I will give you is both a screenshot of the very complicated version, but also this version, which is a simplified version, which allows you to then think about what would be the case for your particular business. Now, can you see my Excel spreadsheet on screen at the moment? Yeah, great. Okay, this is a very simplified version of a business plan. It just looks at some key elements. And what I'm going to do is talk those through. And what you would need to do is go away and think about what these are for your application. And they will not be the same. They might be similar, but they're not going to be the same. This is a simplified model. You can then layer in complexity once you've got your basic model. And I'll try and talk about that as we go through. So the first line of this model is, what is our marketing spend? And I'm just assuming we're going to spend £2,000 a month on marketing. Now that marketing, and we're not going to worry about what it is, but that marketing is going to get us some new users. And what we have here is I'm saying there are some new users and it costs us £2 to acquire a new user. And that means that we get 1,000 users a month as we go across. Now what we're saying is that as well as the ones that we get through paid advertising, we're also going to get some organic. So these are people who are referring a friend. They're saying, hey, Christian, I've found this great app. Why don't you come along and have a go too? And what we're doing there is we're giving that a formula too, which we're saying that everybody will refer 0.8 of a person. So in every 10 people, 8 will refer a friend and that friend will become active. That then gives us the total users, total new users per month. Sorry, the total users. Then we have to say, well, of these, because as we go on, this just number gets bigger and bigger. How many of them are actually going to be active? How many of them are actually going to use the app? Because it's one thing, you've all downloaded an app, looked at it once and left it alone and never gone back to it. Maybe deleted it, maybe not. So here I'm saying that 75% of people remain active after during their first month. That's quite likely. You're going to use it when you first download it. But then what I've modeled is every month after that, the amount of people who remain active gets less and less. And that reflects in these active user numbers. And this number is the people from the prior month in month 1. Then they're in month 2, 3, 4, and 5. Sorry, 6. And that then declines. So that's 750 users month 1. Of 350 are active in month 2, only 200 in 3, 150 in 4, and by the end of 5-6 months, they've all but disappeared. And that gives you a total active user base. Now that is what you want in terms of how many people are actually going to be utilizing your application in a given month. And from there, you can then start to make some estimates on what your monetization might look like. Here, I've said that we will have some in-app purchases. And again, we've given that an amount. So we've said, how much is that? The value of it, well, it's 83p. What we've said is it's a pound less VAT. We've said, how many people will you do a purchase? Well, we've said 10% of people. And we've said that an average user will look at 10 pages a month of 10 pages and get 10 impressions. And then we've said that per 1,000 views, we get 2p. That then converts into what is your position each month, ad spend versus revenue, and therefore your net outcomes. So you're losing 1,700 a month at the beginning, and eventually towards the end, your revenue streams are 3,000 a month, and your net over the first year is 2,500. This is a overly simplified model, but it does allow you to quite quickly test what the impacts are. So if you make the referral rate down to only 1 in 2, all of a sudden you don't make money, you lose money. And it allows you to test the sensitivities. Now, I would actually say that that referral rate was probably too high. And you'd be lucky if you get maybe 0.25 referrals. So one for every person might generate, on average, for every 4 active users, you might get 1 organic, because that was driving a very large number of referrals. Now, once you start actually having an app, you can model this more accurately. You can say, well, actually, what is the real number of active users? What is the real views per month? And you can then reflect those. But this is quite challenging in that, I'm predicting a loss of £16,000 in my first year. Actually, that's probably understated, because the ability to build on things, it does require a period of time to get going. Not everything will have this sudden massive viral effect. Now, there are layers of complexity you can add on top of this. An example would be, not all users are equally active. So you might say, of your user base, X% will be power users, X% will be regular users, and X% will be light users. And they might have different profiles in terms of the in-app purchases, in terms of the way they interact with the app and the number of views. Christian, I can see you raising your hand on behalf of someone.
Indeed, I am. So we've got a question from Krishna, and he's asking whether a 10% conversion from active users to paid users, so someone that goes from a free model to a paid model, is a typical number for an app, 10%.
It is very difficult to say. There are some sites that can give you some background to that, and this is classic desk research stuff. You're going to have to go away and look at what your industry, what your idea might do. But there is a site called App Annie, which has statistics around in-app purchases and what are the key apps doing in the industry, and they have quite a lot of free reports that they produce. So do have a look at App Annie. Annie is spelt in the normal way, unlike most internet names where they miss out the vowels. Yeah, App Annie is a great source of statistics. The other thing is to look at the charts on things like Google and Apple Play to see in your particular sector what's performing well and what model are they using. In-app purchase can take a number of different models. One is, I purchase another level, another book, another item. Another can be a freemium model where there's a free version and a paid version of the same application. Sometimes that's as simple as removing adverts, although Apple frown on that now as a sufficiently good reason for charging. And others, like Fortnite, if I'd have told you that the amount of people buying attire for their virtual character that serves absolutely no purpose in the game whatsoever would be £1 million a day, then you'd have all gone, you're bonkers. But that's what's happening. So, just because it's not paying for something real doesn't necessarily matter. Any other questions on business models?
No more questions, but yeah, that was a really good question anyway, and I think we went quite deep, some real insights there.
Okay, great. Let me go back to the main deck now. So, bear with me. So that covers a bit about business models. Now that's the sort of fiscal engineering behind your application. But what we're really going to focus on today is the look and feel of the application. And the first and probably the most important step in that is determining who will use your app. Now, I'm afraid anybody who in the background was going, well, my app is so good, it's going to appeal to everybody. I'm sorry, it's just not true. You know, different restaurants appeal to different people. Domino's does not go after the same audience as a Michelin starred restaurant. That doesn't mean that Domino's or the Michelin star is better, because Domino's probably makes more money per annum than the Michelin starred restaurant. But what it does mean is that there are different types of users, different people who would find that brand, positioning, usefulness, availability, packaging, look and feel more appropriate. This is a persona that we developed, a quite detailed persona, around a ticketing app for railways. I would suggest that most apps, you don't want more than 4 or 5 personas of your key user types. And these personas are caricatures. They're not real people. They are, by their very nature, a little nonsensical. They will not address every single individual. And obviously, we are all individuals. And even if you broadly fit a persona, there'll be something in there that you disagree with. You know, if I come up with a student persona, I can guarantee that every one of you doesn't have all of the same traits, but as a group, you broadly do. This particular persona, who we called Maria Jones, and we always give our personas names. It makes it really easy when you're later in the process and you talk about how you use a persona. You can refer to them by name rather than say, oh, you know, the persona about a busy business person who lives in the southeast of England, etc. So you just say, for Maria, this would mean. And that's really what the persona is for. It's a way of a shorthand of attributing your features that you're building against a user who would use them. And the premise behind it is, if you have a feature within your app that doesn't service one of your key personas, then my question to you is, why is it there? Why is that feature there if it isn't servicing one of those key personas? Because it doesn't necessarily add any value to the application.
If I might just quickly, I'll just do like a hand raise whenever.
Really good way of doing it.
Yeah. So I've got a question from Ben, and he's asking, somewhat slightly pivoting off the personas, slightly different, but he's asking, what is the source of a viral growth in apps? I think that's the secret. Don't we all
well, the old secret sauce. Well, in the old days, it was really straightforward. There weren't very many apps, and if you could get into the App Store listings, then people would discover your app, because when I logged on to Google or I logged on to Apple to go and find an app, yours would be featured. And an example of a company who used this with great effect is the Telegraph newspaper. So they spent a lot of time making sure that their app was in the top 10. If their app was in the top 10, they turned off their advertising and promotions. If it dropped out of the top 10, they turned it on to get it back into the top 10. But while it was in the top 10 apps on the iTunes store, it generally maintained its position, because people knew what the Telegraph newspaper was and would go, oh, right, oh, yes, I read that, I would like that, let me download that, let me try that. But as soon as it dropped out, they pushed it back up. So yes, it was, it's not quite viral, but it's a free effect. The other is that shareability. Why and how will I share the app? You know, is it easy for me to invite a friend to play? Is it easy for them to get going? Is it easy for me to, so we have a rule, we call it the pub test, which is, can I tell you about my app that I have on my phone, and you get up and running on your phone without either of us leaving the pub? Now, the purpose of that is because in the early days, often people would say, well, you go off to this website and you do this, and then you have to validate this and do, well, actually all of those cause a problem with that test, and it's about how shareable is it and how easy is it for me to get up and running. There are lots of things you can do to help with shareability. One is to make it rewarded. So if I get you to join, do I get a reward? Does the friend get a reward? Does that track right? And does it pay out? Because if it doesn't track right, you'll soon stop doing it. If it does, and I think Yo Sushi a couple of years ago launched a feature on their app, which was a credit that allowed you to pay at the till in store. And what they did was they said, to encourage people to do it, they said, download the app, recommend a friend, and you get X pounds worth of credit. And so lots of people were doing it. Lots of people, and what they didn't do was think about the impact, because what they did was they ended up with a lot of people getting a lot of credit. I ended up with £120 worth of Yo Sushi credit on my account. And then they stopped the promotion and then changed the rules. And then I felt very bitter about it, because then I couldn't cash it in right. They changed the way it worked. But that worked really too well, because it was too easy for me to get it and too easy for my friends to get it. And therefore there was a really strong viral effect, but it was probably a bit too much. I hope that sort of addresses the answer in part, but I could probably do a whole session just on virality and how to encourage it. Christian.
I've got another question. This one is actually coming from me, and I'm sure everyone would be interested to hear it as well. As I mentioned, I'm actually in the process of constructing an app myself. I'm not the coder. The coder is someone else. He's coding it for me, friend of mine. From my perspective, on average, because as far as I'm concerned, because he's doing all of the work, so it's very cheap for me. But in terms of maintaining the app itself whilst it's running, how expensive is that? And I'm sure everyone would love to hear that, because that's why we're all here.
Yeah, so we have a ready reckon for our clients, which is that 20 to 25% of whatever you spend on building an app, you will spend on maintenance and support a year. So if you spend £100,000 building your app, your support and maintenance for year one, I'd budget £25,000. Now, you might want to convert that into hours of dev time if it's more about the person's resource. Now, that's to sort of maintain a steady state. In reality, what you probably have, and this is typical of how an app project works, is that you start out with an idea that's this big. You actually have enough time, enough money or time to build one that's about this big. But you also have the other limitation of either time or money, whichever one you haven't applied yet, and that takes you down to about here. So you build this one, but you've thought about this one. And actually, if you then carry on building that one and building that out over a period of time, having launched a minimum viable product, then you will actually spend more on that. And you could be spending 50% or even 100% of the original build cost per annum. It really depends. If you've built an MVP and you're going to sit on it and then wait, then work on 2025, or if you have a continuous development roadmap, in which case it will continue to grow and cost.
Yeah, one more before we move on. I'm being the eager audience now. In terms of, is majority of those costs then the software developer hire? So for example, the individual that will be coding it, or is it something else?
The mix of costs, and that would go back to the business plan, is what we didn't do, but was in the deeper model, is you will have costs associated with usage. So if you have a video platform, clearly the more users, the more video streams, the more costs for your back-end servers. And so you need to model your costs against your user base as well as your dev cost. So your dev cost is sort of fairly fixed. You've then got a variable cost based on usage. That usage variable may be very small, depending on what the app is, because typically you're obviously going to be using, it's all taking place on the user's device. So actually that doesn't cost you anything, but back-end servers do. That said, I know that Essex Uni has a relationship through incubators to the likes of Amazon and Microsoft, and both offer startup packages for entrepreneurs, which give you quite a lot of free resource for the first year or two. And that's by far the easiest way to get going. Just be warned, they are like crack cocaine dealers, giving you something for free to get you hooked, so that you continue to use it. So just bear that in mind when you're signing up to all the free stuff, that actually eventually you start paying for it. But it's good to try, and it's a good way of getting going. I'm going to get back to the personas for focus now. So this particular persona for Maria, she's a non-executive director of a company. She provides entrepreneurial leadership. She travels. She's about 30. She studied law and business management to an MSc. She's Caucasian, married with 3 children. She's likes the flexibility and intuitive ticketing for ad hoc rail travel as a cost-effective solution to unplanned trips. She works remotely for 4 different companies in different major cities. She's Apple savvy, using an iPhone, attends meetings across the UK for a variety of length, also taking care of her children at home. She would sum up in terms of her relationship to this particular app we were building. I'd like an app to recognize where I am when traveling, offering me the best tickets and routes available for that day. Due to my sporadic travel, I'd like a system that aggregates my travel costs to make the most effective solutions immediately, even when I cancel a trip. Now, it's quite a detailed persona. And that was one of, I think, about 4 or 5 on that particular project of different types of higher usage rail users that would want a particular ticketing solution. What I'd like us to do now, and giving Christian some warning, we're going to break into groups, is I would like to now spend, what time is it? Say 15 minutes in groups. Actually, no, let's say 20 minutes. So we'll finish it around about just before 3 o'clock, to develop some personas for an app for Essex University. So if you imagine you're building an app for Essex University, who are the core users of that app, and what groups do they broadly fall into? Now, clearly, anybody and everybody that visits Essex University could use the app, but what are your core users? Now, for example, I visit once in a while to come and do a piece of work. Probably not going to make your radar in terms of core user types. Visiting people who do a talk every now and again at Essex. Clearly, students are, and it might be that students need to be broken into more than one group. But what are their characteristics? Who are the other users? Who are the other people that would want to interact with an application? Now, clearly, you don't know what the application does, and for the purposes of this, it can do anything and everything you want it to do. It's about who are those users. And what I'd like you to do is spend a little bit of time trying to give me a pen portrait of each of those user types. And then what we'll do is come back into the group, and I'll get each group to give one of the personas that they've got that hasn't already been described. So whoever gets to go first gets it easy. But we'll go around in each group, we'll just describe one of the personas. So if we can go into, how many of us are there? Christian, about 30? You're doing the Zoom mute thing.
But of course, it happens. So there's roughly 31 of us in total. We'll break everyone into roughly 5 groups. Yeah, 5-6 groups, and there'll be 5 to 6.
If we go for 5, that would be helpful, because obviously exclude myself and Andy.
Mm-hmm. Okay, cool. We've got a question from Jade. Let me.
Yeah, I'll take the question while you sort the groups.
Bear with me. Go ahead. If you go ahead, then unmute yourself.
Yeah, I was just going to say, could you quickly pop up that slide so I can take a photo and remember the bits that we need to.
Well, what I'll do is I will leave this one up.
Thanks. It's just
yeah. They're just some examples, but who are they? What do they do? What are their characteristics? What is it about an app that would be particularly this mythical app? What are the key features that maybe appeal to them that might be different from somebody else? But it is a caricature, so it will not, your mythical student, assuming you only had one, would either be male or female. Clearly, that's going to be half wrong for everybody. But what other characteristics are similar? You know, age, perhaps social background, length of experience at the university, and that may be a key one. But think about those things. What are those things that differentiate your users?
Okay.
Yeah. But I will leave this slide up. Okay, how are we doing? Shall I kick off? Right. First of all, I think everyone will have found that it's actually, it's actually quite hard to do that, and it's ridiculously hard to do it in 15, 20 minutes. We would typically maybe take a whole day with a team of people working through who these personas are and thinking about them, and using a variety of mechanisms to start thinking about it. Some desk research. Actually, it's all well and good me saying that there are this type of people or that type of people and they behave in the following way, but what's actually the stats behind it? What information can we get? In this case, what are the numbers of students at the university? What are the numbers that fall into each of the different groups? Are we defining a group that's too small, that really can't have its own characteristics? It must be part of something else. And that's clearly something you would do in detail for your own application. And this is only trying to give you a framework to remember what it would be. Let's go around some of the groups and see where they got to. So picking on randomly group number 3 as a starter. Does someone want to tell us about one of the persona types that you developed?
Yes,
you want to take?
Wait, I think that was us.
Yep.
Right. Okay.
Yep.
So one of our personas is Daniela Rodriguez. She's Colombian, 27. She moved to the UK to do a master's degree in human rights, and she lives on campus. She uses the application to move around campus because she doesn't know her way around yet, and to find classrooms, to use the timetable, to organize her diary, to set reminders for assignments, and to order food from restaurants on campus.
Okay, great. Group 4. We've got a volunteer from group 4. We'll come back to group 4. Maybe someone can remember. Christian, do you want to throw up the groups again, so because in case people don't remember which room they were in?
Yep. So group 4 was Anya, Benjamin, Elle, Medina, Vanessa, and Kater. I think that's the name. I can show you I'll show you the.
All right. Anybody from group 4 want to come forward, or are we all too shy? I'm not going to force anybody.
We spent good part of the 15 minutes trying to decide what the persona is. We didn't really come to a conclusion. I don't feel like it.
Okay.
But it's definitely a woman in her 20s, we said, an undergrad, and she uses the app to find locations on campus, get access to her timetable, find the resources that she requires for her course, does all the...
They're quite similar to the last persona. Okay.
Yeah, typical undergrad, yeah.
Yeah, but then there was since it was taken, then we also discussed about applicants. So currently high school students, the ones who are thinking about applying to the university next year. So they're they need to choose a modules, a course. So therefore they would need to go to the site, read about all of it. Basically maybe get acquainted with their timetables as well, with their stuff, with the history of the university as well, alumni, and all of the information regarding university would be something they would want to know about. So that website would be really informative for them.
I think that's a really good example of thinking about other persona types rather than the really obvious, which is students on campus. Who else would use it? And a really good example is those that might be coming, because they'll come, they'll look, they'll download it, they'll want to look around, and they perhaps need to have a slightly different experience within the app, because they're going to be using it for a different purpose. Group 5.
Okay, so our fictional character is called Leanna Butcher. She's in a 2-year relationship. She's a student, MSc Law, and we said she's a 2nd year, and she's 20 years old. And her main responsibilities and goals in university are time management and just the flexibility on how she can study, and basically studying is her main priority in university. And her request for an app is that she would like an app to tell her the availability of the spaces in the library and how many people there are. So yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's a good example of somebody who's different from that first time person at the university who's going to need a map, to somebody who's actually now more worried about the specific resources available at a given location. And that is that sort of differentiation as people progress through. Great, thank you. Group 1.
Okay, well, we have got the typical the first year student. That was the thing. So it's Ryan Smith. It was a student in his first year studying economics. He works at the cafe. Well, he's going to be working at the cafe on campus. He's 20 years old. He's English and from Braintree. He has one older brother, and he's a single guy. He likes to go to the gym around 3 to 4 times a week, and he enjoys socializing, going to the pub with his friends, and he actually lives on campus himself. We did say that obviously he wanted an app that helps him to organize his schedule with the modules, classes, events, find his way around, and also to be able to connect with other students. So more in the social way as well.
Yeah, and I think that sort of differentiation between someone who's new and trying to make friends and discover stuff, and somebody who's already established and got a friendship group and is now worried about getting on with their course, a little bit less about perhaps finding new friends. And you know, he's single, so he's probably looking for dating, and you know, and that's very starts down very different routes in terms of what does the app need to do for that particular student, and that, more importantly, that student type. Yeah. Group 2.
Well, the initial one we did wasn't taken, but we have another one, which is John Jacobson, who is 34 years old, who doesn't have a degree and is currently single, and he's local to Colchester, but he works in Colchester as his job occupation as a culinary staff, and he uses the app mainly to order his appointments, so he knows what shifts he's working at and can log his pay and everything, essentially.
Yeah, so a staff user. Yeah, which is a key, you know, a significant percentage of people on the campus are staff, and they have a very different use case from your average student. Now, one of the questions that would then throw up is that then the right thing for them to use this app, or should there be a separate solution for that group? And at this stage, I'm not trying to answer that question, but that is, you know, that's the thing. Is it so different that actually it's not worth trying to put everything in one? The way I like to think of it is that you know, some of our clients try and put everything that they do inside one app and make it like that's a Swiss Army knife app that's got something for everybody. Actually, if you think about the apps you use on your own devices, typically they do one thing quite well. When they mature, sometimes they start to add new features, and I'll take an example like that would be something like Uber, where it started out as a taxi booking app, and then they added in the food bit. And I still think the food bit sort of clashes, and it, you know, is that not better as a separate bit? Why would, you know, I don't go to a taxi app to order a food. I go to my, you know, the food type apps that I would have. The BBC has this dilemma because the BBC does quite a few different applications, and they've taken a view of keeping things relatively separate. So if you take the sports app and the news app, if you look at the core functionality, they're basically the same. there are stories and there are alerts, but one's themed all around sport and one's themed all around core news, because there's a different user type, and therefore you can market it to a different group more easily. So those are some of the considerations when thinking about those persona types. And I think, what you all need to do is go away and think about your idea and who they are. But as I say, if the answer is everybody, it's the wrong answer, because you're not going to market to everybody. There's going to be people who it's more appealing to, that will get you a lower cost of acquisition, that will become a more viable product off the back of it. Right, I'm going to go back to my slides because that's the way that my brain works. So let me just go to the right slide and then try and screen share again. And if I'm doing that right, you should see Maria back on the screen. And if I do that, then I've got control here. Great. So you've all looked at some of the personas, and what it does, and I think most of the groups I dipped into were all doing this. They were talking about the features and functionality that individual would want, because as soon as you start talking about that person and giving them a bit of character, you suddenly go, oh, well, Ryan, he's going to be looking for some sort of, dating, meeting people solution. The lady whose name I forget now, who's looking at the library, well, she probably also wants to know about free computer terminals elsewhere, perhaps other learning resources that might be available, etc. So there are lots of different, and there are some stuff that will be common, like, what's the buses running through the campus timetable and when's the next one? Anybody on campus might want that. That functionality would appeal to multiple people. That then leads you to how you fit that all together. So what we've been talking about so far is the users. And now I'm going to talk about two aspects of design: user experience and design, or UI, user interface. These are similar but different. The user experience is the journey you go on in the app. So it's the clicks, it's the home page that leads to the sign up page that leads to something else. It's not what it looks like, it's the journey. And what we do to capture that is a wireframe, an engineering diagram of how the application fits together. So taking an app, you might have a home page that you come to that has all of the core elements. You then click on any one of those elements and that takes you to a sub page which is focused around a particular area. You may then click further into, for example, T's and C's or detail or information. So taking something like WhatsApp, and I'm going to actually open my app so I can make it easier to remember. You come in on that page of all the summary conversations that you've been having. That is your home page in WhatsApp. You then go into an individual conversation and you've got then the conversational view. You've then got from there the ability to go into sub pages which are relevant to that. But those sub pages are not very important. They're not pages you go to a lot, so they don't need to be at the surface, because I don't really need to read the group info or the group media or search a group that often. They're things I only do once I'm in a particular conversation. The other thing is, if they were at a higher level, I'd then have to choose group info and then the group, rather than be in the group and get the group info. So there's a logical sequence to how things fit together. That wireframe is the first phase, and then how it looks, the fact that it's green text, that it's this font, etc., and it has these icons and this is the order on the page, is the visual design. So the wireframing is the engineering diagram. The visualization is what makes it look good. So the first stage of that is wireframing or paper prototyping. And this is really, this is the stage that, you start to capture your idea. This is an example of a wireframe that we've done. This is but a part of it. Let me see if I can get up the main version. Bear with me a second. I've got a PDF of this, which I will circulate. And again, I have client approval for this. That's quite a small version. I will find a better version of this. Right, so you should be able to see on the page here. Don't worry about what it is. It's about how it's captured. So this is the journey here at the top, the first time someone comes into the application. So these few screens are the first time sign up. So typically when you join an app, it's a splash screen that's telling you a bit about it. Maybe there's a bit of an explainer about the app. There might be some sign up that only happens the first time you join an application. Down here, this would be the standard homepage, this one here. And then from there, you could then go to these sub pages. And then off of those pages, there are then more detail. And one of those would be, for example, a flow around perhaps booking a venue. One might be about making a donation. One might be about what's happening at the venue and a link into calendars. But what you're doing is, at this stage, is just capturing what is the functionality and how does it fit together. Now, a way to do this is through a process called card sorting, where what you do is you write down on a Post-it note or a card or the digital equivalent, all of the functionality that you think an application should have. All of the things that you think, and you have to think of the detail. So as soon as you say it has an account, I have to be able to change my email address. I have to be able to perhaps upload a picture. I have to be able to change the picture I've previously uploaded. So think of the core and then think of the bits off of that that you need to enable it. Once you've done that, take all those pieces of paper, lay them out on a table and start to go, well, which ones naturally fit together? What do you want to do at the same time? Because that'll help define what should be on a page. And so physically moving those around, you will sort into functionality those elements that would be part of a different pages. So on the home page, you might have key nav off to the other key pages. That's quite typical. Something like T's and C's, privacy statement, all those sort of legal stuff. They're going to be sat in an area called settings, and you're going to bury that somewhere because nobody really gives a monkeys, and you're only doing it because it's a legal requirement. So that can then go on a sub page somewhere. But what you can then start to do is then work out how they fit together, and that's what this wireframe does. Now, in a little bit, I'm going to ask you to have a very quick go at what is the main page and maybe 4 or 5 sub pages for that Essex Uni app that you've been sort of talking about through the personas. Again, it's more just to get an idea of what would fit together and then what would go perhaps under some of those. Don't worry about this isn't about what it looks like. It's not about the sequence on the page. So I might say, okay, on the home page, I can go to my profile, I can look at a map, I can do this, I can do that. I'm not saying, because I said it first, that the profile is the most important or the visually largest on the page. It's just from the home page, I can get to it. Later on during the design, what you're doing is actually trying to put a visualization of what that might look like. And in all likelihood, you're probably going to do what most people do, which is turn the profile page into a profile picture that goes in the top corner. And when I click on it, that's what takes me to it. So it's not visually dominant. The map might be very dominant, particularly on the first time you open the app. Yeah, but that's not wireframe, that's design. That's how it looks.
We've got a question, Paul, if you...
Please.
Yep. So one question that we've got is, what software are you using to program your apps? Is there anything that you recommend specifically?
I'm going to come onto a slide in a bit, which talks about different software for different phases. Not development yet. We'll come on to that. That's February. But there's a whole series of software, some of which is free and some of which is very low cost that can help you with this phase.
Also, if you need an example, or if anyone needs an example of a prototype, just a visual prototype, I can always showcase one at the end using PowerPoint. It's a dummy prototype, but you get a good idea of what you can achieve even with a simple, even with something as simple as PowerPoint. So if you want to stick around for that, but yeah, go ahead.
So that is a visual, that is a wireframe. Then, as I say, you come on to design. Design is what it looks like. So having done, and this is actually the design that goes with that wireframe. And so then what you're doing is visualizing what's on each page. So this particular one is for Hillsong Church, which I believe a certain Mr. Bieber is a regular at, but it could be anything. And that gives an example of how wide a range of products that we help design. They have, this is about going to events. This is about general engagement. This is about an event they had coming up. This is, it gives an age away the age of this design. It's 2016, back in the day when people could actually go to venues. And they, for example, church I'd never really heard of very much. They sell out the Royal Albert Hall for 4 nights running for their carol concert. So big audiences. This here, we're now getting down into layout, iconography, the font, the color. And what we're detailing here is we are giving that information so that when it's built, it can be built exactly right. So, this logo is a particular size, this is a particular font, this is a specific color. I mean, clearly in this case, it's white, which is a relatively easy color to code. But it's giving that visualization. It's providing the iconography for the navigation. So in the wireframe, it would have said from this homepage that you could go to the Sunday service page, the giving page, the church life page, and the what's on page. It won't have said that they were represented by small buttons at the bottom of the page. That's something that was worked out later. It would have also said there would also be a link off to these following key areas, or that there was another way of defining them. Now, again, what I'm going to do is provide you with some of these assets to have a look at. The tools that I've talked about, I haven't talked about, but I was going to talk about. So for wireframing, there's Axure, not to be muddled up with Azure, which is the Microsoft hosting solution, Balsamic, Figma, and Mockups. Having had a play around today, I think Figma seemed to have a free account that you could use for developing one project. Mockup has a free account, but it limits the amount of stuff you can put in it. So you can only have 200 objects within it, which actually isn't enough to design a whole wireframe. But both are relatively cheap. There is also one called paper prototyping, but that's iOS only. And at the end of the day, actually drawing these things at the start is probably as good a solution as trying to do it using some software, because you almost get the software, you almost have, because you're learning the software, you tend to get focused on what the software does rather than what your idea is. I would say get a big sheet of paper, a marker pen, draw on it, cross out, draw again, draw it on Post-it notes and move it around. Old-fashioned brainstorming techniques, and also do it with somebody else. Get someone else talking about it, because that's what, and we saw this in all the groups about personas. If you'd have all been left to your own devices, it would have been even much harder than doing it in a group. In terms of UI and design, the main industry default at the moment is Sketch, which is again an iOS piece of software. The advantage of that is that if you design it in Sketch, it then outputs in a way that a coder can then take all the data from your design, which is very slick. Adobe XD, part of the Adobe suite, clearly a pretty expensive solution. I think the license is £30 or £40 a month, but it is a very good solution. And you also may have access to licenses as students at the university. InVision is one I'm going to show you shortly, is a way of building not only the UI and design piece, but also a prototype, a visual prototype. And Figma also does the UI design piece, so that helps you with both aspects. If you wanted to go away and play at actually coding something, but don't code, then the MIT App Inventor and Ionic both offer solutions that work with pretty low code, if not no code. The MIT App Inventor is one that I've actually used, and I do not code. I talk as if I know what I'm talking about, but I am at heart marketing and management for the company. I actually have smart people who can code. But I did that course with my daughter. At the end of a short stint, I'd managed to make an app which had a picture of my son, and when you pressed it, it made a slapping noise. That's as far as I got. She built a golf game, which goes to show, it's different people have different aptitudes. So, but it's definitely a no-code basis, and you can deploy it to your Android device. So have a play with it. It's quite a good way of getting your head around coding if you've not done it before. When you have done your wireframe and then done your visualizations, what you end up with is the ability to stitch those together and make an interactive prototype. And that's what I've done here. I say I've done, clearly I didn't do it. It was someone who had more skills, but it was part of my design team. Let me just see if I can get the, right. You should see on screen now a mock-up of the application. And you can see I have a gray dot here which represents my finger. If I just click on here, you'll see that there are areas which are in blue. They are the clickable journeys. So what you can do is you go, right, okay, I'm going to sign up. And then it fills in the data. And then I obviously would click next. And so I can click next. And then that takes me into the application and I'm signed in or set up. What it does is it really brings it to life. So now I can see what the journeys are. I can explore the application and see what it would look like. So it's the wireframes and the visualization stitched together. Now I'm showing you this obviously on a desktop PC. This could be and can be installed on a phone and is then clickable on the phone. And that really brings the idea to life. And if you code, code as in the context of make clickable enough areas within the application, you can then do some user testing with people and see what they think of the application. Have they got any ideas? Do they stumble? Do they not know where to go? So you can say to them, right, okay, where would you click to sign up and see what their route is? Do they click on new user or do they just click on the Facebook sign in at the bottom? Do they, when they come here, what are they more interested in? Where would, if you were going to find out more about whatever, where do you go? Let me just click and see. Yeah, so there, for example, there was a thing on Church Life. If you go to what's on, there is some what's on. Go to the giving page, it then tells you about how to give. So it's got details of what the service is, etc. So you can explore the whole app and see, and it also does, as you may or may not see, because it's over Zoom, but there's a little animation of it sliding down. So it's actually a little bit more than just static visuals. And it can take you to the alerts. So here we've got 123 different states for the various pages within this one interactive prototype. But it really does bring it to life. And in terms of development timelines and cycle, this is, 15 to 20 days of resource time into the project. And a project of this scale might take 150 to 200 days to actually build the entire project. So it's relatively early on in the project. And therefore, if at this point someone said, actually, I really don't like the way we've done these symbols down the bottom, it's a bit old school. Can we move to doing something, on a nice interactive menu? This is the time to change stuff because it's so much easier at this stage. You won't get everything right. You will need to change it once you've developed it, but you can minimize that if you do some good testing. Any questions at this stage on either wireframing, the design, or the prototyping? Great. Well, what I would like people to do next is to break again into groups. And what I'd like you to try and do is come up with a number of screens for this Essex University app. What's on it? Now, remember, you can just help you use the persona that you, or personas that you've developed to put those ones in. Don't worry about the fact that's not addressing everybody, but so therefore, what are the key ones? And what might be, if you get, say, a home page and 4 or 5 subpages, what might be the pages or elements that come off of those pages? What would that particular page also need to have? Yeah. And again, we're going to spend sort of 15 minutes or so doing that. Again, it's nowhere near long enough. You should spend, a wireframing process for us is, a couple of days work. And that's once we've got most of the ideas down on paper. That's already when we've done the personas and worked out what the functionality is. Then stitching it all together will be a couple of days. Designing it would take another 10 to 15 days of resource of actually making it visually correct. So don't be worried that you're not going to achieve everything in the 15 minutes or so. Christian, do you want to break us into groups and then we regroup at, say, 10:02 for a quick recap of where everybody got to? You're going to have to, I'm afraid, I'm going to give you a challenge. In other words, I didn't think of the answer already, which is you're going to need to capture this. And I've seen in different groups, you're using different tools as a way of doing that, different screen sharing, someone doing the driving, some using Google Docs to be collaborative, whatever. Can we leave it with you guys to work out? If you're in a room, I give you a piece of paper and a pen and it would be really easy. Yeah?
Awesome.
Brilliant.
Yep. So now we'll break everyone out into their own individual rooms. How long did you want those for again? Sorry, Paul?
Why don't you set it to 10:02 and then we'll have 10.
Yeah. Okay, that's 17 minutes. Awesome. We'll see everyone. Welcome back, everyone. Yep, so everyone is back, Paul. So take it away.
Great. Okay. Well, first of all, it was nice to dip in and out and see where everybody's thought processes were at. So now in the classic terrified people, I'm going to pick a group number. And this time we're going to start with good old traditional number 1 and work our way through to number 5. So all I want you to do is 30 seconds, a minute max on where you got to in your wireframe.
Okay, should I just share the screen?
Please.
Yeah, and then that would just probably be easier. So here is our app. So we said that basically had the sign-in page, which then the second step after your sign-in page would be the home page. And then from that, you have the subsections, which are the student profile, timetable, modules, contacts, phaser, events, library, leap, and campus map. And obviously when you click on student profile, it takes you through to those 3. And then timetable takes you through to them. And that's how it's kind of broken down.
Yeah, and I think this shows just quite quickly how long the list can get, how quickly.
Yeah.
Is you suddenly realise, crikey, there's quite a lot to this. And not be funny, it's not like you've sat there and brainstormed ideas for half a day of stuff. It's just that's straight out the box. So I think there is a lot. It goes to show how much there is. And I think, as I was discussing in your group, some of those elements then might be even sub-nested within those pages that, the personal tutor details, there might be some headline information on the student profile page, and then you go to a full tutor page underneath that. But again, you wouldn't want necessarily to go to that through any other route. So that's good. Great start. Thank you. Group 2.
Our diagram isn't very representational, so I figured it's better if I just explain it. Essentially, we were doing an app for Essex, whereby the first page would be the home page, whereby the user tracks their location via Wi-Fi. And then the second page will take you onto the map, which is a graphical representation. On there, you can either physically tap it to identify where you want to go, or you could press the downwards toggle button, which would put up a search, and you could then enter where you actually want to go. There would also be quality of life features, such as a toggle for more scenic ways to walk around campus or to avoid rain or avoid people. And there would also be, like similar to Google Maps, a top column of like frequented restaurants and places to eat. And that's as far as we got, essentially.
So, I mean, what you're describing is almost like a single page app. which is not a bad thing. You know, that actually your focus really remains around that map because that's so core, and what you're bringing in is layers and other information at different times. And that's a perfectly that's a great way of doing it. I mean, you only got to look at something like Google Maps and see that that's how their core functionality works. They do still have some other pages. You know, you've got, when you get a profile page, you know, you go off that map page, but I think it's a great start. And as I talked to you about in your group, you know, you shouldn't be ashamed to go and look at what other people have done to solve similar problems. You know, go and look at what Google Maps have done. Go and look at what you know, other navigation software does. Look at other similar solutions. Go and look at what other universities have done. All of which, you know, learn from what they've done already. Great. Group 3.
We've done something similar to like a list of functions in the after the sign up page. You just have like a list of different functions like maps, timetable, deadlines, library services, room booking.
Did you manage to visualize it at all, or?
It was just a list on Google Doc.
Fine,
yeah.
That's fine. So, so very similar to group 1.
Yeah.
In terms of structure.
Exactly.
And I think it goes to show that it's a really quick and easy way to capture the idea, is to start just writing stuff down, and then you can then start to put that on post-it notes and move it around the page, and that will then help you with your ideas. And as you do that, you'll then think of more sub-functionality. Oh, well, hang on, if I do that, I also need to be able to do this. I need to be able to edit that. I need to be able to update that, or I need to be able to email someone from that page or phone them, or etc. So that it'll help you define your functionality, which is why it's so important that you do this all at the beginning, not start building. So it's a real temptation, particularly if someone can code, to start building something. I guarantee what you build was not the right thing because you haven't thought it through. Yeah?
Makes sense,
right?
yeah.
Group 4.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think we want to share screen. Yeah, so basically what we're thinking about is to make an application for applicants. So for high school students who are intending to start the university, so they just they continue as a guest or a login. But yeah, if we're focusing on the ones who did not enroll, they just do not have a student login. So yeah, the first page, they see their status of their application. So that would encourage them to start their application, and it would explain all the steps of it. Then the main information is they could, you know, search different courses. They can compare prices. They can compare different modules that are available within those courses, and maybe, you know, research projects that other students made. Also, they could, you know, search stuff and also contact them one-on-one, which would make it easier, because if they want to, you know, study within the area, they could probably help them with something. Then there are a different feature like about scholarship, visa, and funding. If like you're an international student or overseas, you need to pick that, and that part would basically like help you prepare and organize all your like application process. Then there's also part about welcome events that could, you know, like just spark your curiosity, because that's what university intends. Yeah, that tells all about open days, maybe some societies, activities, yeah, all the like information, maybe even awards and stuff, so that students would be interested in, you know, in future studying there. And also, yeah, alumni and Q&A, yeah, so that they could chat and not wait, you know, for an email from them, but do that, you know, instantly. Yeah.
That's great. So I think one thing to remember as you progress the idea forward is to start splitting them into their separate subpages and mapping them in terms of exactly what fits together. Because while it's good to just group them, and I think all the groups have done that, is, you know, what would go together. It's then nesting it down to, you know, what would be on each page versus what would be on a subpage. It's an iterative process. So start with this is the first cut, and then you go further each time. Group 5, I think that's the last one, unless I've got my numbers wrong.
So our idea is we've got, oh, sorry, I've drawn it out, so it might be difficult to see here. Yes,
Yep.
Our main page will be 3 functions where you can either access timetable, map, and library.
Mm-hmm.
The library will include the blueprint where they'll show grey areas and green areas, and green areas are the rooms that are available for you to use, and the grey areas are basically rooms that aren't available. And the other function in the library section is to reserve books. So this way you can click on that, and there'll be a search function where you search a book, and basically you click the book you want and you reserve it. For that, you'd have to sign in with your student account. So obviously when you sign in, you'll get to book, book books from the library in the university. And as for the map, it will just be a one just for the university, shows you where your classroom is. So it will just show you where your classroom is. It will link to the timetable, but the timetable function where it shows you what modules or what non-modules, what classes you have, and etc.
Right. Now, you've done what everybody starts to do when you do wireframing. So I'm not telling you off, I'm saying this is a general comment, and I do it as well, is you started to worry about what goes where. There's a natural instinct to do it. You've decided that you've put the little graphic for the icon for the account in the top corner, because that's where you think it probably would be. It's important to remember that the wireframing stage, you're not doing the design. So although it helps sometimes with the visualization, what you're saying is this is on this page, and therefore you don't need to worry if you don't know where something goes, but you know it needs to be on a page. So for example, you're probably going to have T's and C's on there somewhere, a journey to them. It just needs to be on there. The fact that you don't know exactly the visualization of it doesn't matter at that stage. But that's a natural instinct to do. And I think what you need to do then add to that, and I actually find that doing it on paper like that is a really good way to start, because you can even with some of the tools take pictures of the different pages and stitch them together in the prototyping tool. So you can actually use those paper versions. Anyway, that's been really good seeing the different variations. I think what it shows is that it's a pretty complicated process, and that you need to do a lot of thinking and spend quite a lot of time on it, which is handy because we now have a big gap till February. So go away and use this time to start thinking about your product, your idea, develop those personas, work out a wireframe. Don't worry about designs, just worry about what's it do, how's it connect together, and then we'll talk next time about how we can go about building it and some of the challenges around that, and different approaches that we can take. I didn't know if Andy, you wanted to say, oh, Jade, I can see a question there. If anybody else has got a question, please visually raise your hand, digitally raise your hand, or otherwise poke Christian in some digital format.
Sorry, yeah, this is probably going to be a silly question, but so the wireframe, I understand, is the pages and connect and how the layout connects. The UI and design is obviously the style and the theme. Prototyping, what's that?
So that's bringing it together. So what you're doing is you're taking the, having worked out what's on every page, you then design every page. And what you're doing then is you're actually connecting those designed pages up so that they're in a clickable format, so that when you click on the map, it then takes you to a page with the map on it. And it's a visual representation. It's not coded. It doesn't actually work. It's only a way of bringing them together. And a bit like that Hillsong one I showed you, it looks it looks like quite a lot of work has been done, but actually no coding has been done. It's just done in a visual prototyping tool. And it's a way then you could then show other people, prospective users or maybe prospective buyers of an app, this is what we're thinking of building. What do you think? Would you pay for it? Would you use it? Does that make sense to you?
Like a dummy version, basically.
Yeah, it's a non-coded but we call it a visual prototype because it's just the images cleverly stitched together, and the software does that. What you do is in the software you say, right, when you click on this bit, you go to this second image that we've got, which is another page in a different state.
Okay. Yeah.
If you have a look at the Hillsong one and have a play with it, you'll see what it means, because there's all that is images stuck together.
Okay.
We'll
Okay,
send that
thank
round
you.
as part of the package for post today.
Yeah. I was wondering, in regards to using wireframe apps like Marvel, like firstly, is there a way to get higher content? Because if you use those platforms, they're quite generic visuals they initially give you to like create your wireframe. And secondly, I was asking a question in regards to communicating with a graphic designer and moving forward from a prototype stage into a graphical user interface. How would you go about directing a graphic designer to like create a vast comparison of different potential? Because I found that personally quite difficult to articulate to them how you want it without telling them what to do exactly.
Yeah, so, well, hopefully, I mean, look, the point of somebody being creative is that they do come up with the ideas, and I'd let them. In terms of the fact that Marvel or Balsamic or whatever has some very standard things and it makes it look all the same, remember, we're not designing it. So the fact it looks the same isn't important, because it's what's on the page. What you're then doing is creating the visual identity and the layout during the design phase. The approach that we would take, and I'd recommend this for you guys, is take 2 or 3 of the key pages and get them to design those. Don't worry about the rest.
Okay.
Worry about those key, that home page, and maybe one other key page, maybe if it's a booking app, the booking page or similar. And then what I'd do is I'd say to them, right, this is what I was thinking. It might be, tell them what you like and what you don't like. Well, what apps are out there that you think are visually appealing, and what do you think is visually not appealing? And give them an idea, but also ask them, right, okay, so could you do something like that? But could you also do something ignoring all my advice and just do what you think? Yeah. Now, what's really hard is for them to come up with a second really good idea, because it's quite hard coming up with one good idea. It's like, oh, well, that was my good one. Here's one that's a bit shitter. But that's where perhaps having somebody else do it, asking more than one person to come up with some visualizations. Once you've then done 2 or 3, typically what you do is then you look at those and you go, well, actually, I like 80% of that one, a little bit of this one, and I like the way we did the icons here. Bring all of those together. That becomes your top layer design for those key pages, and then get them to design all the rest. And then once they've designed all the rest, you can then turn it into the interactive prototype. But don't try and design everything at once. Do it bit by bit, and you don't have to solve all of the problems at the same time. So maybe you can't quite work out what the app icon looks like. That shouldn't stop you carrying on with the rest of solving the problem. And hopefully then that will come out of something maybe later on.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Sorry, can I just come in? I'm a bit confused because I did not attend the first session and I wasn't aware of it. That's why I didn't attend. I was just wondering, what is it that you require from us in February? Is it our own design, a group design?
That hasn't been defined actually yet by Andy, but maybe he can answer that at the wrap up of this session. But I think Christian can send you a link to the recording of the first session.
I think I've got it and I will look at it, but I'm just confused what we need to do by February.
Yeah, we'll come back. Maybe Andy can answer that in a sec. I
think Krishna has got a question.
Yeah.
Very quickly, assuming we are on, we've got the sub pages designed, is there a way, like you demonstrated, to track how the user would be navigating
so there's some research software you can use. I have to say, I can't remember if it will work with a visual prototype, but there is some software certainly that will work with early app prototypes, where you can monitor finger impressions on the screen and therefore hotspots, touch spots, etc. And obviously this is clearly with permissions, also the user's face, certain reaction. And so certain research agencies specialize in, for example, getting people to test it. And what they do is they train their testers to talk as they do it. So they talk out loud about what they're thinking. They'll say, I'm thinking about how I get to the home page. I'm looking at the page. I see this icon. I think it's probably that. Let me click it. So you're actually getting their thoughts as well. But there are a number of test tools out there. But there are some that do a bit like you can get ones for websites that look at click traffic. You can get similar for apps. And so you can see where people are clicking, whether sometimes you learn, you've put a button there that you think is the button to click to get to somewhere, and you find that nobody's clicking on that. They're actually clicking on a different image, which isn't clickable. And that's when you start to learn, right, okay, we need to change it.
Right, thank you.
Anybody else before we wrap up?
I think I unfortunately have to make a move in 5 minutes. I've got another meeting to kind of head to. So just very quickly, the one in the chat asks so they can do the color schemes and the theme for the graphics as well as part of the.
Yeah, if your designer would typically help you with that. They may or may not help you with the brand. The branding is in itself a huge piece of work, and we would tend to say, if it comes out of the design, great, but actually you could spend as much time and as much money just developing the brand as the visualizations of the app.
I might also chip in there at the end, especially for Abel, who will work with a designer, regardless of whether they're your friend or whether you're paying for it. Make sure, just like Paul said, pick designs out there in the field that you like, companies that you like the look of, and bring that to them and tell them what you want. Because if you said you want them to design a lot of pieces, there's nothing more frustrating for a designer, for someone to come to them and be like, well, design me something. And then you go through hundreds of iterations. If he's doing it for free, you'll just piss him off. If you're paying for it, you're going to pay a fortune. So either or, go there with a solid idea.
Yeah, so I think I do apologise. I need to sort of wrap this up, and just conscious of us needing to get Paul off onto probably the next steps as well. So I just wanted to say what we'll do is we'll draw a conclusion to the questions there. So I'm sorry if you've got extra questions. If you can send them over to Christian, what we'll do is we'll see if we can answer them. If not, we might sort of
always
kindly
pick them up at the beginning of next time.
Yeah, we'll save them until the beginning of the next workshop in February. So just in terms of what we're looking for, so part of the idea behind the app development workshop we wanted to run this time was that there'll be the opportunity for people to pitch their ideas, and we're going to have some funding available, which will essentially be used to help you develop an early kind of stage sort of MVP. So maybe something just very basic, but gives you something to build on. Maybe go out and do some market research or some basic user feedback, that kind of thing. So we're just working on that at the moment. As I sort of said, we'll be sending more information out. There'll be a process for you to actually apply to pitch your idea. It will be heard by a panel as well. And more information on that will come out in the next week or two. So between now and February, it's really just to sort of say, if you didn't attend the first session, go back and watch that video. Attending today as well, if you've got these two, you've been given some great insights by Paul as to kind of the way you can spend your time between now and the next session in February. We're not necessarily looking for fully developed ideas of apps, but we're looking for kind of viable products that could potentially be developed over, periods of time. So it's really just to say, use the information that you've been given over the last two sessions, and there'll be two more sessions in February. And then after that, there'll be a pitch opportunity where there'll be funding awarded to the best idea or two ideas, depending on what that looks like. And those will be going towards helping you to take your idea to the next steps. And we're exploring what that might look like in terms of maybe access to some of our computer science and electronic engineering students, or maybe potential internships for some people to actually help you with those early stage ideas. So on that note, I'd like to sort of say thank you very much to Paul for his time this afternoon. Thank you to everyone who's joined us today. Hope you've enjoyed this session. The recording will be shared online shortly, once it's been downloaded and edited, so that might take a few days. Christian will upload it, and then if you keep an eye on our YouTube channel, Essex Startups, you'll see last week's session as well. So I don't know if, Paul, you've got any kind of concluding remarks?
No, I was just going to say, there's a question in there about site structure and building the site and what to tell the developer and what not. I'll cover that off next time. And I look forward to seeing everybody in February. I think the tools that you've got today up to this point are what would enable you to tell the story in the competition for your idea, because you can bring it to life with these tools. And that's what we encourage our clients who are coming to us and they're looking for maybe board approval for a project or investor approval. This is as far as we take them at that stage. And so they're the perfect bits to get you ready for pitching. So I think it's over to Andy now to tell us how he'd like you to pitch, and then you can get yourselves ready over that period.
Yeah. And there'll be more information coming out about that as we get closer. I know this sounds really silly. We don't want to give you too much information because it's essential for you to attend all 4 workshops in order to be able to pitch to the panel at the end. So if you joined today, we recognize that, you know, as long as you take the time to go and watch the previous recording, but primarily it's about your attendance, and we don't want to give too much away. Otherwise, we may not see you at the next 2 workshops. So any complaints, please feel free to email them to Christian on startups@essex.ac.uk. But thank you very much for your time this afternoon, everyone. Wherever you are, look after yourselves, and we look forward to seeing you at our next workshop.
Thanks all. Cheers.
Everyone, take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.